If I ever got big enough on YouTube to get sponsors, I would definitely want Lindt Chocolate to sponsor me. Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be building off of what happens after all of those persecutions. Hopefully this video is not as long as the last one, but as usual we're going to be doing a oversimplification of history to kind of get at the bare bones of what is happening here. And so this one I'm calling the bishops and emperors, because we're going to be seeing what happens when the church and the Roman Empire start to get married and come together. And so our story begins with Emperor Constantine at the Battle of Milvian Bridge. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail, and I've linked a video that goes into much greater detail of the hot mess that was the Roman Empire at this time. But what's sufficient to say is Constantine, the son of the Augustus in the far western part of the Tetrarchy, is riding to Rome to take on his political rival Maxentinus. I'm going to call him Max. Maxentinius. But he's on his way to Rome to take on his political rival Maxentinius, who controls another of these four, to hopefully take over the whole Western Empire. And along the way, he has this vision, or he sees a sign in the sky. It's kind of disputed on how this went about. But long story short, it is of Christ, right? It's of the cross, it's of the Cairo, the first two letters of Christ's name. And so he has them put the Cairo on all their shields. And this battle becomes significant, one of the most important battles of history, because really this becomes a battle between Christianity and paganism. You have Constantine, son of a Christian, who later becomes a Christian himself, who clearly favors Christianity, taking on Maxentinius, who is a traditional pagan, who sees the pagan religions as the religion of Rome. And at this battle, Constantine absolutely wrecks Maxentinius, and Maxentinius dies in the battle as well. And so Constantine, victorious, enters into Rome. What was unique about Constantine's entrance into Rome is that he refused to make the ceremonial sacrifice to the gods.
What?
This was unheard of. At this point, any emperor, upon ascending the throne, would have to make a big sacrifice to the gods. Constantine instead just walks on by and ignores it.
Yeah!
Next thing you know, he's taking a plot of land in a different part of the city, and now he's building a massive Christian basilica, the site of the modern-day St. John Lateran. And within a couple of years, he has built not only this massive basilica where St. John Lateran is today, but he also builds the original St. Peter's Basilica and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. What we can see is Constantine sees Christianity as a way to unify the empire. Right? We talked about the reason Christians were persecuted last video was because they were not worshiping to the gods. Worship to the gods was seen as a unifying force for the entire empire. But by the time Constantine's here, you can see 10% of the empire is Christian, and so this empire is divided not only in terms of its religion, but also in terms of its leaders, with 4 different leaders all fighting each other. And so Constantine is trying to unify it under himself through multiple military victories, but also sees Christianity as a way to unify it religiously. And so clearly he is favoring Christianity, and with this you get the Edict of Milan in 313 AD, less than 10 years after the end of the Diocletian persecution. So again, context, 10 years ago, if you're a Christian, you likely were being persecuted and could be martyred at any moment. 10 years later, you have Constantine, who sends out this letter to the entire empire, and essentially what it does is it makes Christianity a legal religion. It says that Christians praying to their God is equal to making a sacrifice to one of the Roman gods. And so this is massive. Now, one thing to note is Christianity does not become the official state religion until 380 AD. Right? A lot of times we think that, oh, this was him making Roman a Christian nation. No, that doesn't happen until after Constantine's death. But this is really good for Christians for a couple of reasons. Number one, it is now legal to be Christian, which means as a Christian, I no longer have to fear for my life and have to die for the faith. Right? I can now be openly Christian throughout the entire empire. The second is Emperor Constantine eventually becomes a Christian himself. And before this point, the emperor was seen to be the son of God, or the Pontifex Maximus, the high priest of the Roman Empire. Well, if the high priest of the Roman Empire is becoming a Christian, guess what a bunch of the common folk are doing? Well, they're becoming Christian as well. So by 350 AD, over half of the Roman Empire is Christian, right? 50 years prior, only 10%. By the year 400, over 90% of the Roman Empire is Christian. All right, so many people are following in the footsteps of the emperor, and this is really good news because now there are more people to follow Christ, more people to preach the word. But there's a lot of issues that come up with the Edict of Milan. The first is everyone is a Christian now. And this doesn't seem like an issue until you realize that a lot of people are becoming Christian not because they care about Christ, not because they believe in Jesus, but because this is more the cultural, fashionable thing to do.
Yo, Steffensmeyer, did you hear I'm a Christian now?
That's great, Saikul. Glad to hear you've accepted Christ. Why'd you become a Christian?
That's what all the cool kids are doing. See, the emperor became a Christian, so I became a Christian.
Well, I could have died yesterday for being a Christian.
So?
Do you even care about Jesus?
Who's Jesus? He sounds lame.
Right? People are more culturally Christian than actually caring about Jesus. And so you have this really abrupt shift of this tight-knit group of people who would die for their faith. And then 30 years later, we're now the largest religion in this empire. Right? That's going to have some growing pains. Right? Going from a close group where everyone knew each other to everyone being Christian, there's going to be some problems. Right? So how do we stay united with everybody being Christian and not a lot of these new Christians caring about the faith as deeply as someone who would die for it? The question becomes, what does it really mean to be a Christian? Right? There's a different audience. No longer we're talking to this passionate group. Now we're trying to get a bunch of lukewarm people to actually care about Jesus. Right? So we're going from the band that's us against the world to now the world is us. And what happens? Well, this is where we get the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. And for context, this is the council that deals with Arianism, which we talked about last semester. So just as a reminder, Arius was a preached that there was one God. That's good. But he had an issue when we said that Jesus is God, because he says, look, Jesus prays to God. So how could God pray to God? It seems like there's two gods. So what he says instead is that Jesus is not God, rather he is the perfect and first creature of God, and that there was when the Son was not. And this becomes an issue because half of the bishops, and at some points more than half of the bishops in the Roman Empire, agree with Arius, and the other half do not. And the bishops start arguing and fighting with each other, and we're starting to see that the Christians themselves are not united. Well, Constantine's having an issue because he's choosing Christianity, the religion, not only for his personal beliefs, but very publicly as a unifying force of the empire. But clearly Christianity itself is not unified. And so Constantine actually calls the First Ecumenical Council of Nicaea, 325, to settle this dispute. He pretty much is telling the bishops, get your crap together. I became Christian in order to unify the empire, and now you are all fighting amongst each other. Figure it out. Now, this is a significant council not only because it is where we get our first official definitions of who Jesus is, but this is the first ecumenical council, meaning worldwide. And so bishops from modern day Spain, modern day England, right, modern day Jerusalem, Rome, all of them, the whole world, Christian world, comes together. And you never had that before. You had plenty of councils, but they were all local, nearby bishops discussing with each other. But Constantine, being the emperor, actually pays for all of the bishops to come together to have this big council to figure out, is Jesus God? And we see that the council does affirm that Christ is fully God and fully man, as we talked about last semester.
And it's sweet, sweet, sweet victory.
The problem is, after this council, you get a couple emperors who are actually Arians, and so it's not till the Council of Constantinople in 381 that you really have the final settling of this. And so there's still a lot of flux in history that I'm glossing over here. But what's significant is Constantine wants Christianity to unify the empire, and the Council of Nicaea is the first time that all the bishops in the world come together to discuss this. But we're starting to see some tension of, well, Constantine's a Christian, but is he the head of the church? Because he just called the first church council. What is the relationship between the political Roman Empire and the Catholic Church that Jesus starts? And it's with this that I want to look at one case study in the case of St. Ambrose and the Emperor Theodosius in the year 391. Think back 100 years ago. Let's say we're in 250 AD. None of the bishops knew the emperor, and the emperor did not particularly care about any of the Christians because they were a minority group. But fast forward to this time, and suddenly the Emperor Theodosius is a Christian, and Ambrose is his bishop in Milan. The question is, who's in charge? Can the bishop tell the emperor what to do, or does the emperor get to tell the bishop what to do in terms of matters of faith? And it's with this that we come to the massacre of Thessalonica in 391. Long story short, the emperor had around 7,000 citizens massacred under the guise of a circus because the citizens had angered him earlier because it looked like they were trying to revolt. And so Ambrose hears about this. He tells the Emperor Theodosius, you cannot receive the Eucharist. And you have this picture here where it shows Ambrose refusing the emperor access to a church.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
I mean, put this in context. This is the emperor of the whole Roman Empire. Armies at his command. No one can tell him no. But this bishop is refusing him access to a church because he's sinned greatly. And the question is, what's he going to do about it? And what the emperor does is he seeks forgiveness from the church. Right? Ambrose is saying, you just killed 7,000 people and you call yourself a Christian, go through repentance. And he actually bows to the demands of St. Ambrose. And so he had to go through a public confession in time of repentance. And what we see, and there's plenty of other cases, in which the bishops are now able to stand up against the emperor. Whereas 100 years before, if the emperor wanted something and a bishop did not follow it, that bishop was dead. Think about it this way. Before, the emperor was the head of the Roman religion. The state ran the religion. But now we see that the church is separate from the state, and the state cannot tell it what to do. And so what we see is the emperor is within the church, but the emperor is not above the church. And we start to see the church is having some political power over its emperors. Going forward, the emperor is going to be an important part of the church, especially in the Eastern world, but he's going to have to follow the rules of the church. He's not above it. He can't do whatever he wants. So the emperor no longer is the head of the Roman religion. Instead, it is going to be the bishops. And so what we're going to look at in our next video is this question of what do we do with all the people who had betrayed the church, the traditors, when they enter back into it? And what is the role of forgiveness in the church? And with that, we will be looking at St. Augustine and a heretical group called the Donatists. So I hope you're all doing well and not too stir crazy right now, staying at home. So as always, stay healthy and stay holy.
Hey y'all, don't forget to like and subscribe and comment. Can I go home now?
I'm on my way.